No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken episode number 361. Happy Friday to you. But breaking today, Joey Barton announces he is quitting public life after a brutal cancellation campaign against him, which could see him locked up for social media posts as early as next month. What are they so afraid of?
Socialist utopia that Keir Starmer and his fucking front bench are trying to build. When we're allowing our pensioners, our most vulnerable people to be attacked or to freeze in the winter months, and we're sending aid to places that have got nothing to do with us to try and influence soft power decisions that enrich corporations. I think, you know, we're living in a dangerous time.
What I don't need is absolute bakes like Gary Neville, right? Whose dad's called Neville, so we can instantly establish his nan and granddad were a pair of cunts. Because if you call your kid Neville, you're a fucking cunt in my book.
But this is not a one-off, because Joey Barton is one in a long line, and I'm just going to say it, very few people will, of British white men, from Tommy Robinson to Laurence Fox, cancelled by the deep state once they start to spit too many facts, prompting Connor Tomlinson to draw comparisons to the US cancellation campaign of Nick Fuentes.
You should be asking why every single media outlet is owned by the same people. You should be asking why the demographic vandals who belonged in the last Conservative Party are now getting comfortable careers dictating what is and isn't allowed to be said.
I am a spokesman for the disaffected white man because I am one, and you two are not.
You don't have to agree with Nick on anything he says about Israel, some of the insulting things he says about Jews, his inconsistency on Islam, his use of racial slurs. You don't have to condone or agree with any of that to know that every syllable he said there is true.
Now, ironically, Connor himself has just been cancelled by Reform UK for speaking out. Meanwhile, this is the rubbish the British regime media is forcing down our throat.
I'd like to see him get more seats so he has a stronger voice, but I do like his clarity of voice. I really like his clarity of voice.
But he hates you guys, don't they? That side of politics hate
I don't
business
think he
owners.
does.
They hate entrepreneurs. They hate capitalism. They hate people making money. They think it's an evil.
I don't hear that.
London, compared to any city in America, is safer, cleaner, tidier, happier, and with the possible exception of New York, absolutely overburdened with way more culture and cuisine than you could possibly imagine. The finest place to live on God's green earth.
We must grow and continue and take over not just parts of Birmingham, but the whole of Birmingham, the whole of the West Midlands, the whole of the UK.
So in my digest next, I'm going to reveal why the plan is to systematically silence Britain's native white men, especially young men, and why we must fight against that. Then, the aforementioned Connor Tomlinson, host of Tomlinson Talks on YouTube, joins me live. Also coming up on the show today, Talk TV's bitter civil war over the sacking of Mike Graham explodes into public, with Kevin O'Sullivan attacking Mark Dolan and Russell Quirk speaking up. The BBC's pathetic apology to Donald Trump won't be enough, as the deadline looms, and Newsnight is the latest show to be exposed for its fraudulent editing of the US president in a bid to destroy his reputation. And an official probe launched into BBC breakfast presenter Naga Munchetti after a string of bullying allegations as she loses her agent. So we're going to reveal the latest on that. Then in the uncancelled after show on Substack, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle told a flat-out lie about the Kardashians having a photo consent form at Kris Jenner's 70th birthday party, meaning it is now war between Hollywood royalty and our fake royals. So we're going to team up with royal YouTube sensation, according to Taz, for all the royal latest. That's going to be over on Substack at the end of the main show, www.outspoken.live to sign up. It's a Friday, which means we're also going to reveal the worst Britain in the world this week. This is where we put your Uni and Jackass winners from across the week head to head. You can vote right now. in the posts tab on YouTube. We've already had tens of thousands of votes. A quick reminder of this week's nominees. On Monday, it was Adil Ray, the Good Morning Britain host on Woke ITV, for pushing the concept of the introduction of Sharia law into New York. Tuesday, Tim Davie, outgoing BBC Director General. We all know why. Wednesday, the tit whisperer himself, Zach Polanski, leader of the Green Party. And Thursday, Tony Blair for his continual pushing of digital ID. So 4 interesting nominees. They are going head to head right now. Let me know your feedback as well. I will read out some of the best at the end of the show today. So do stick with us. We're going to reveal the worst Britain in the world this week before the end of the show. But now, let's go. This is now an epidemic. Rather than listening to Britain's native white men, especially young white men, the plan by the deep state is to systematically silence them, either by fear or by cancellation, or in the cases of Joey Barton, Tommy Robinson and Laurence Fox, literally criminal conviction and the threat of being locked up, with the ex-footballing hero even been lambasted by a judge over the past few days for daring to wear a Union Jack scarf to court. And by the way, please do not say that this is not already happening, because look at the white men who have been locked up for their words, from Alex Belfield to Wayne O'Rourke to the late, great Peter Lynch. And so after a truly deranged deep state witch hunt over many months, Joey Barton, I'm sad to report today, has thrown in the towel. He is silenced and he admits it. This was his bombshell statement overnight, which has of course been ignored by the MSM, who have achieved their goal. Joey Barton wrote, "Over the past few years, a lot has happened, professionally, personally, and emotionally. And it has reached a point where I need to pause and take proper stock of everything. I've decided to step away from social media for the time being. This isn't a decision I've taken lightly, but the intensity and pace of the online world, combined with my own pressures and mistakes, have had a real impact on my well-being and judgment. I need space to reflect honestly on that, to understand how I've handled things and to improve how I communicate going forward. With the move to a new studio underway, this feels like the right moment to reset, reassess my priorities, and think carefully about how I want to use my profile in the future in a way that's constructive, responsible, and true to the values I want to stand for. While I'm taking this break, my accounts will be maintained solely by the admin team. I won't be posting personally until I feel I'm in the right place to come back. Thank you to everyone who has supported me, challenged me, and stuck with me. I'm taking this time because I want to return better, clearer, and more grounded. See you on the other side." Now, why did the deep state want to silence Joey Barton so desperately? I genuinely think we've got to ask that question, okay? I believe it's because he is a white, working class hero, or at least he was, I guess, depending on how you look at it, a white working class hero who turned on Slippery Starmer's brand of socialist hell.
Are you not peering over your fucking moat? Are you not peering over your castle walls? Are you not smelling what's going on in this country, where people are fearful of going to work for the daughters being accosted outside primary schools, and to have a phone call to say the daughter's almost been decapitated by somebody who should have been on a terrorism watch list? Like, what's going on? Like, yeah, it's all right for you in Windsor Castle, you know, with the horses guard and all the fucking cosplay and the nonsense of you're better than us. You know, you think about the First and Second World War, those people who's paid the ultimate sacrifice. Is this what they paid it for? Is this what they risked it all for? For this socialist utopia that Keir Starmer and his fucking front bench are trying to build? When we're allowing our pensioners, our most vulnerable people, to be attacked or to freeze in the winter months, and we're sending aid to places that have got nothing to do with us to try and influence soft power decisions that enrich corporations, I think, you know, we're living in a dangerous time. And if you call it out and you speak about it, you know, the state will use every single bit of its apparatus to silence you and shut you up.
They will. And they are. And I want to understand exactly why. I think part of it is because when Gary Neville went viral for hating on our Union Jack flag, Joey Barton is pretty much the only football hero, apart from the brilliant Matt Letizia, prepared to stand up against him.
I just kept thinking as I was driving home last night that we're all being turned on each other, and the division that's being created is absolutely disgusting. Mainly created by angry, middle-aged white men who know exactly what they're doing. Funnily enough, on one of my development sites last week, there was a Union Jack flag put up, and I took it down instantly.
If you turn up and you're to me, I will truly practice equality, because I will punch you straight in the face, exactly the same as I would a Chinese person or an English person
or a white person
or an
anyone.
Eskimo. If you turn up with bad energy and you want to smoke, I will happily have it with you, no problem. I have no considerations about your race, your gender, whether you're able-bodied or disabled. I will inflict maximum punishments on you for coming at me with that energy. But if you want to be my mate and you want to be sound or you want to ask some questions, I will equally bespokely treat you with the same energy.
Yeah.
What I don't need is absolute bakes like Gary Neville, right? Whose dad's called Neville. So we can instantly establish his nan and granddad with a pair of because if you call your kid Neville, you're a fucking cunt in my book. So if you don't like that, Gary, come and do something about it. Get on the phone to Cowley Sutherland. Get on the phone to Misfits. I will gladly spear elbow you like Alex Pereira did to Ankalaev, straight in the top of your little shit wig for the comments you've made this week.
And I mean, let's just compare that to the usual type of punditry we are subjected to every day. Every single damn day from the MSM. So, a couple of examples overnight from LBC. First, we've had James O'Brien trying to convince us that Sadiq Khan's London hellhole, where Wayne Broadhurst, a good, honest, white man, working class white man, was stabbed to death in broad daylight by an Afghan illegal just a fortnight ago. Well, James O'Brien is trying to convince us it's utopia.
London, compared to any city in America, is safer, cleaner, tidier, happier, and with the possible exception of New York, absolutely overburdened with way more culture and cuisine than you could possibly imagine. The finest place to live on God's green earth. And yet racists and various other freak shows who claim to be patriotic are never happier than when they're attacking London. People who lie about crime statistics. People who lie about community cohesion. People who hate London because it is all the things they claim don't work. Diversity, equality, inclusion, all the things that they lie awake at night despising like black people in adverts. London is living, breathing, throbbing, pulsing proof of just how magnificent a city can be. But hey-ho, here's Billy Buncher-Numbers on Twitter with a bulldog avatar and 73 flags in his profile to tell you that London is a no-go zone and it's not safe and that we've got Sharia law. Oh, he's also thinking of emigrating to the UAE soon, where they have actually got Sharia law.
Also on LBC, the so-called businesswoman Deborah Meaden, a leftist star of the BBC's Dragon Den, is saying with a straight face that the Greens, the hard leftist Islamist Greens, are good for the economy while endorsing the tit whisperer leader, Zach Polanski.
I worry at the moment there's sort of this black and white thing going on. You know, you're for or you're against, and that is it. We seem to have lost the ability to think about things on balance. So, but I think, so what I would like to see, I'd like to see him get more seats so he has a stronger voice, but I do like his clarity of voice. I really like his clarity of voice.
But he hates you guys, don't they? That side of politics hate
I don't
business
think he
owners.
does.
They hate entrepreneurs. They hate capitalism. They hate people making money. They think it's an evil.
I don't hear that. I don't hear that. I think he likes good business behaving well, and I like good business behaving well. You know, I think business has a responsibility. We've got a lot of issues facing us. Business can play its part. So business has a responsibility to play its part, and I agree with that.
Paying more taxes, perhaps.
Pay more taxes, but also for a government to come up with to help us, you know, pay more taxes.
So forgive me if the at times edgy commentary of Joey Barton is far more preferable and generating a far bigger online following from young white men who feel completely ostracized by the establishment and regime media.
Because he's one gobshite. I've had enough of him. I've had enough of his nonsense when it comes to football. He manages Salford's enterprise. The class of nonsense. You're hanging around with somebody who buries his own fucking brother's bed. He shouldn't even speak to. He should be extradited to go and live where Napoleon lived on that island when the French had enough of him. He should be living on an island, Ryan Giggs, an island away from everybody else. If you will fucking iron out your brother's fucking bed, you should be put on Robben Island or the equivalent of that in the UK, never to be seen again. Lock him on there, throw away the key, because he'll only start goosing the seagulls anyway. Because he is a fucking unscrupulous character. And I'm hearing the classic nonsense. Not only, they're back in there, it's flattening someone's bed in there, or ex-bed.
Yeah.
And they're going round, I'm going, Gary, lad, you've got your own problems. Salford can't win a game of footy. You're hemorrhaging money left, right and centre, right? You're sacking people who were working for your building sites for having any flags, right? He's got a tower getting built in Manchester. Like, this is not a fella who... Like, he has no comprehension of what's happening for the normal citizen. By that, I promise you, every single day, I will tear the page out that book and wipe my shit pipe with it. And she's also come out and confirmed that she's in the same-sex relationship.
Well, I think
so what? Well, we thought that once I seen you put a footy kit on, I fucking presumed you like the old fucking fairy cup anyway. You know what I mean? You're fucking drinking from the fairy cup if you put a footy kit on or a hockey kit.
But I can't believe that's some kind of snooze.
But this is how obviously full of fucking boss stuff the book is, that she's at. These are the serials that she's pulled out.
Okay, so you might think it's a little bit too gross, right? Or that he's gone a little bit too far, but you just know that those sorts of conversations are taking place outside of the regime media. And it has got me thinking that there are comparisons between Joey Barton and the man dividing the American right, Nick Fuentes. Offensive, usually, wrong, often, but increasingly influential amongst young white men, despite the deep state bids and the sort of big tech bids, I guess you would say, to cancel him. Connor Tomlinson has been explaining
He's
why.
weird. He lives in a basement. I'm sorry, did you guys forget that that's your target audience that you're trying to pander to? Did you forget that for 2 seconds? And I'm the inauthentic person? I am that person. I am a spokesman for the disaffected white man because I am one, and you two are not.
You don't have to agree with Nick on anything he says about Israel, some of the insulting things he says about Jews, his inconsistency on Islam, his use of racial slurs. You don't have to condone or agree with any of that to know that every syllable he said there is true. We crave authenticity. And if you are a young man who has grown up as a native on the internet, who is sick to death of treading round the landmines of unjust cancellation because someone else got offended, if you are sick to death of being held back by the laws and the culture and the censorship and the speech codes in your own country, if you think that you've been robbed of an inheritance, if you think that you don't have many avenues to achieve, if you don't have a father, unlike myself, who has been blessed with a loving family. But if you have been robbed of male authority figures in media, in your household, in your school, if you in your entire life you've been put down, if you've been insulted, if you have been told that you can't say this, you can't make friends, you can't get ahead, because everything you do is toxic and patriarchal and oppressive.
And of course in the UK, the elephant in the room remains Islamism. Even as Muslim MPs like Iqbal Muhammad quite literally call for a takeover, the MSM remains conspicuously silent.
Yes, these activities, this unity must grow and continue and take over not just parts of Birmingham, but the whole of Birmingham, the whole of the West Midlands, the whole of the UK. Grassroots democracy in action. And we, our communities, have shown the establishment and the rest of the country that we will not be taken for granted and we will win! know, the establishment know that if you let one person stand up to them and speak the truth to people about what power is doing to them, then more people will stand up, and there will come a point when we all stand up against oppression, against injustice, and against corruption in politics. You see the power of solidarity. You see the power of solidarity, the power of all of us together. Individually, we may feel helpless, lonely, often frightened. Together, nothing can stop us. No tyrant can rule us. No party, government, or dictator can demand from us subservience. Together, we are powerful. Remember that and take that message onto the streets of Birmingham and share it with every single person you know in this country and abroad.
And of course, that's not normal, but it is being ignored by the mainstream media. And Connor Tomlinson writes, it is an integration miracle that we have Pakistani clan voting blocks in British cities. What possible GDP contribution was worth importing millions of people who are open about their intent to hijack our politics with sectarian, Islamic and ethnic interests? Why has no Conservative or Labour politician been made to answer for demographically gerrymandering Birmingham, Bradford, Luton, Leicester, London, Oldham? They're just saying what they want in front of cameras, and yet still MPs in the Westminster media avoid the topic because it makes for impolite dinner party conversation. I don't care. These people shouldn't be here. If they want to turn my country into a third world slum, they should be returned to one. But the problem is, of course, that in the UK, there are gatekeepers. And they're there to shut down our honest conversations. We've seen that in recent months with the truly establishment so-called free speech stations GB News and Talk TV silencing a host of dissenting voices from Tommy Robinson to Rupert Lowe, and now this week, Mike Graham. Indeed, Connor Tomlinson too, over the past couple of days, cancelled from appearing at a local Reform UK event where he was meant to be debating alongside Matt Goodwin and David Starkey. And he's quite rightly mad as hell, urging us to rise up against this cancellation by outlets and organisations that appear to be on our side when they're really not. Writing about right-wing fakes, like the Spectator editor Michael Gove, we cannot allow political parties and Westminster media publications to protect politicians' reputations or gatekeep contentious issues like immigration and identity out of discourse. We cannot let the people who ruined our country get away with containing our outrage and stage managing the solutions to the problems they caused. And he said in a powerful Substack, I don't care if this gets me blacklisted from everywhere. That is only proof that the gatekeepers fear their ideas don't stand up to open scrutiny and that they insist on inflicting a delusional utopian ideology, the blank slate and British values on a population that has consistently voted against it. And we should remind them that as the defensive posture taken by the Zionist right to the popularity of Nick Fuentes shows, you can't refuse to talk to disaffected young white men or about the topics they care about and expect them to just go away. Through sheer force of will, an avatar for their concerns will fill the vacuum. You cannot complain about losing the game if you failed to field a star player of your own. Watch.
You should be asking why every single media outlet is owned by the same people. You should be asking why the demographic vandals who belonged in the last Conservative Party are now getting comfortable careers dictating what is and isn't allowed to be said on the side of the political aisle that is trying to deal with the problems they created. You should be trying to circumvent the gatekeeping, the censorship, and the containment. You should be too big of a problem to ignore.
And Connor Tomlinson joins me now. Connor, really fascinating stuff. Do you see why I look at the treatment of Joey Barton over the past few months and the fact that it has now led to this statement where he has effectively withdrawn from public life? He's effectively been silenced. This is ahead of his sentencing next month, where he could be jailed, by the way, for his posts on X, which include claiming that a DEI hire is a DEI hire, you know, that football pundit, that one. Can you understand why I see some parallels between what's going on with Nick Fuentes in the US? Like, I'm not saying, by the way, that they are at all the same in terms of their views or even actually their histories, because, of course, Nick emerged out of the MAGA movement. Joey Barton was a mainstream footballing hero. But in terms of how they've been shut down, there are parallels.
Somewhat, Dan, yes. I will strategically circumvent commenting on Joey's case because you don't want to give the state or the judiciary an excuse to silence you too, other than just mentioning the football commentator in question. I don't watch football, so I can't remember her name for the life of me, but when I saw her debate Andrew Gold on DEI, I didn't think she was one of the brightest minds of our era. Let's put it that way. But that aside, there has been an effort to crack down on, yes, sometimes contentious, insulting, foul-mouthed, in the case of that funny clip of Joey Barton talking about Gary Neville's parents and grandparents that you played, commentators who speak about the issues that concern young white men, specifically to young white men. And the reason that them being young white men is relevant is because every single other group in what is meant to be a liberal, democratic, colorblind meritocracy gets to play identity politics. And this is something that the left-behind liberals who joined the likes of the MAGA coalition or the anti-woke movement in Britain, someone like Constantine Kissin, has made the point about time and time again. He said, if you guys don't want white identity politics, then stop beating up white people as a collective, denying them their identity unless you can use it as a kind of cudgel with which to beat them as a sort of stick with historical, inexpugnable guilt, demanding reparations, saying that they're to fault for all of the ills in the world, that colonialism and racism and sexism and xenophobia and slavery are the reason why certain cultures don't succeed as much as we do in Britain or in America. And so if you don't want that politics, that sort of backlash to come, stop playing that game. And inevitably, it turns out that young white men who grew up on the internet, who notice patterns, who say inflammatory things at football matches to their friends, or, you know, like me, cut their teeth in Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops lobbies over Xbox Live, it turns out they don't have much of a filter. They have nothing to lose by critiquing and offending the prevailing moral woke orthodoxy that treats them as public enemy number one in their own country, that denies them their heritage, that says there's nothing good about them, that says all of their achievements are a consequence of patriarchal oppression. And it turns out that that generation of digital natives and that population can be pretty talented. And so if you think that kicking them to the curb anytime they try to succeed, that telling them they're not allowed to have an identity or a heritage in their own country, and that they're not allowed to have a platform in any mainstream institution is going to discourage them, no. They have a large audience, it is an organic audience, and even if we don't like the things that they might say, whether the state finds Joey Barton's comments grossly offensive and wants to sentence him to prison or a fine for it, or whether you or I may disagree with the disparaging way in which Nick Fuentes talks about Jews as a collective, it actually doesn't matter, because the establishment, which has censored certain topics, said that some things are too taboo to talk about, and insulted white men for a very long time and raised their consciousness of themselves as an identity group, the establishment that did all that made these figures popular and made them possible.
And Connor, can we just talk about these gatekeepers for 1 second? Because there will be a lot of people watching who think, okay, GB News and Talk TV and The Spectator might not be perfect, but they're a hell of a lot better than the British Bashing Corporation and Woke ITV and Sly News. So can you explain what you mean by these sort of establishment right outfits who claim to be for free speech? I would argue they're anything but, and there are a whole load of examples of that, from Tommy Robinson to Katie Hopkins to Joey Barton just this week. Mike Graham as well, sacked for his Facebook post, which he claims he didn't post, on Talk. Can you just explain what these gatekeepers do and why you think they're playing quite a destructive role in shutting down debate?
I can, Dan. So there are two provisos I'd like to make first. There are, of course, good people that write for the likes of
Absolutely.
The Spectator and The Telegraph, and that work in institutions like, as we've mentioned before, the Free Speech Union, etc. And also, every single outlet has an editorial line, so it's to be expected that they choose to platform some things and not others. It's not whether or not they're allowed to do that, it's questioning the prudence of the decisions they make and the people that they hire. So, if you are the Spectator, for example, and you have been shepherded by Fraser Nelson for about a decade, Fraser Nelson who denies that the English exists as a distinct ethnic group, who every time there is a crime committed by someone who never needed to be in the country in the first place happens, dives out with a graph trying to insist to you that actually crime overall is going down. He sounds an awful lot like James O'Brien saying London is the best place to live in the world despite the number of knife murders, phone thefts and a rape reported every hour. So, a man who has admitted in 2017 in an interview to gaslighting people on behalf of the Conservative government, telling people we hear your concerns, while never actually needing to address the core concern of immigration and multiculturalism in the first place, has disparaged the reputation of your outlet as being the premier magazine on the right, somewhat. Okay, who do you replace him with instead? Michael Gove, the longest-serving cabinet minister of the last government, who, as the editor of that publication, now gets a say over what can and cannot be said on the side dedicated to, at least ostensibly, cleaning up the problems that he and his government caused. If the Spectator was so outspoken against gender ideology, was so outspoken against mass Muslim migration and anti-Semitism, as one of its recent covers had on it, if it's so outspoken against lockdowns, vaccine mandates, mask mandates, and shutting schools, Michael Gove responsible for all of those things. Michael Gove championed mass migration, multiculturalism, said at the Dispatch Box in 2024, diversity is our strength, said the great achievement of the Conservative government, the last Conservative government, and he said this to his current co-host of Quite Right in 2023, was that he had increased the superficial diversity of the cabinet, basically more brown and less white faces. This is someone who sat in cabinet championing lockdowns. Like, how can this person be trusted to say what is and isn't acceptable, who can and can't be platformed on the right? And the way that they do this, as happened with my Spectator debate, which we've spoken about before, is they insert themselves into ongoing conversations, and they either try to make the conversation a limited hangout, meaning that they steward the framing of the conversation so that you only say approved things, you only stay on course about approved topics. For example, if you notice anyone watching GB News or The Spectator, you will hear that the only good achievement of the last Conservative government was education reform. Who is responsible for that? Michael Gove and Paul Marshall, the man who funds all of these outlets. But also, if you say the wrong thing, if you transgress on a taboo about identity, ethnicity, immigration, assimilation, then the fact that they are hosting the debate, the fact they've inserted themselves into this something that someone else has already set up, they can try and kill it, suppress it, censor it, and be, well, I'll be careful what I say here, but be very stubborn in their unwillingness to live up to their verbal agreement to release said footage to me as a participant. And so what they do is they pick who and who cannot participate in the conversations, what can and cannot be said, who gets a platform, and by owning the means of funding conferences like ARC, organisations like the Faros Institute that foster academics, GB News, trying to purchase the Telegraph via Redbird, the capital firm that sold The Spectator to Paul Marshall, Unheard and The Spectator. By controlling those outlets, by controlling the money and the opportunities that those outlets can provide, they dangle the implication of an MP safe seat, a column, a podcast, a job doing research for Policy Exchange in front of young enterprising talent to get them to stop talking about things that they find inconvenient because the likes of Michael Gove and Fraser Nelson are responsible for the sorry state that Britain is in today, and they don't want to take the blame.
And of course, they have this very close operation going on now with Reform UK and control a lot of the sort of commentariat too. And so I was disgusted to hear, Connor, this week, you were literally dropped at the behest of what feels like Reform HQ, so probably Zia Youssef and that mob. You were meant to be on stage at this debate with Mark Littlewood and David Starkey and Matt Goodwin. They're clearly considered part of the Reform Overton window, and you're not. And so the local association literally had to axe you. I think that is despicable. And this is the problem when people say, why are we tough on Reform UK? Because they don't even want our voice as part of the conversation. That's how chilling it is.
Yeah, there are people quite senior in Reform who complained about this, were surprised, and tried to get to the bottom of it. And haven't found out who or why I was axed. It could be because I appear on your show, Dan, and we know that you try to hold them to account and they don't take too kindly to it. It could be my criticisms of Islam or Zia Yusuf for trying to call the police on Rupert Lowe. It could be any number of things. It could be, quite conspicuously, that this happened within the same week time frame as my spat with the Spectator over the debate footage, given that Zia Yusuf is good friends with Paul Marshall, the owner of the Spectator, and given that Zia Yusuf was interviewed in a very cosy fashion at Reform Conference by Michael Gove, and strangely enough, Zia Yusuf cited Michael Gove's school reforms as the crowning jewel of the last government. It's very strange. But again, we don't know who did this. Just that, well, yeah, it's very odd. But we don't know who did this. It was someone from Reform HQ, according to the local association. I don't expect to be liked, Dan. I exist outside of political systems as a kind of carrot and stick reinforcer, trying to tell politicians what their base wants and what room they actually have to maneuver, trying to encourage them or discourage them when they make a misstep. So I'm not worried about losing out on an MP seat or a speaking platform at Reform Conference. What I was saddened by is two things. First of all, the way that the local association was treated, because by virtue of whatever I said causing offence, they then lost out on a speaker. I was replaced, by the way, by Sarah Pochin, who then didn't show up without any warning. So lots of people were disappointed about them being down a person, and I know someone that went to the event and they said it wasn't quite as fiery as they had hoped with my presence there. And also, not just the disparaging way in which the local association were treated, people expressing their disappointment, wanting refunds because I wasn't coming, but also it shows a signal that Reform are not willing to cultivate young talent. I'm not saying I'm the most talented man in the world, but in terms of under 30 independent commentator on the right, I've probably got the largest audience. Not a brag, just an incident, right? If they're willing to shun me, then what other young men and the sensible things they say are going to be shunned from not just supporters or their student activist network, who you couldn't name anyone in the lineup when the photo was posted, but from civil service appointments, from potential MP positions, from junior staffers, and just influencers and brand ambassadors. What the success of MAGA was it was young in the 2024 election, vitalistic, upwardly mobile, attractive, energetic, forthright, and fun. And if Reform don't cultivate that aura around them, if instead they cultivate an aura of risk aversion and censorship and try and bring in-house talent that aren't organic and astroturfed instead and just don't resonate with the base, then it's going to salami slice off allies and concede so much ground to their opponents that by the time they win an election, they haven't got the necessary things promised in their manifesto will get blocked by the House of Lords. They haven't packed out Parliament and the civil service with the personnel they like, and they won't be able to get their agenda done.
Breaking today, the explosive civil war inside Talk TV has gone public. And let me tell you, folks, this is now getting messy. So you know the MSM have completely ignored this story, but it's significant because it involves the mainstream media, the future of the independent media, and the fact that Mike Graham has effectively been sacked for a post on Facebook, which he claims he didn't write. And of course, within that lineup, the person who has been boosted, and I just couldn't believe this, is a man called Mark Dolan. There he is, filling the spot that was previously Mr. Graham's and lobbying to replace him on the breakfast show called Morning Glory Behind the Scenes, which both Jeremy Kyle and Kevin O'Sullivan, who are close friends of Mike Graham, don't particularly want to host. But the problem is that those inside the station think that Mark Dolan is going to move the station to the, how do we put it, the mundane middle, I might say, the Tory trivia. And that was made clear last night when Mark Dolan, boasting about the fact that he was hosting Mike Graham's Friday show, posted, Adam Peaty's brother has been arrested over allegations he sent threats to the Olympian during his stag do. Swimmer Adam needed a police escort at Manchester Airport after the trip to Budapest. Full coverage tomorrow on Talk TV from 6 till 10 a.m. Kevin O'Sullivan simply posted, who? But he did so publicly. And that slapdown of Mark Dolan is said to represent the civil war behind the scenes at the station over the sacking of Mike Graham. And the viewer boycott continues. I mean, my goodness, you should see the comments when my friend Howard Cox posted the fact that he was going to be on Plank of the Week, which is going ahead with Kevin O'Sullivan, despite the fact that its audience figures have plummeted. Now, so far, only Russell Quirk. And by the way, I love Russell Quirk. No, he's a Reform UK guy. Don't agree with him on everything. Certainly not his views on Tommy Robinson, but I think he's such a good, loyal man. And he has been, thus far, the only talk presenter prepared to raise his head above the parapet and directly question management over the decision, not just to sack Mike, but also what this means for the station. And the fact that really this is probably now the beginning of the end. Watch.
However, we need to go to the subject of Mike Graham, because over the last 4 weeks, there has been, I think it's fair to say, no pun intended, radio silence by Talk until yesterday, when it was announced on Julia Hartley-Brewer's show that Mike effectively is not coming back to Talk as a consequence of this debacle over this post that appeared on his social media, which he says was placed by somebody else by way of a hack. But that effectively said the following, that he had an issue with the fact that multiculturalism had not worked. I think what should have happened here is that Mike perhaps should have been urged to clarify, make an explanation as to what he'd said in that post, if indeed it was him, and, you know, to offer an apology, and then for News UK to say, look, we employ people with strong opinions. We employ people that say things that are bold and that not everybody agrees with. So in this kind of pang of, some might say, kind of woke morality on the part of News UK to get rid of someone that dares to say something that some people might think is a bit offensive and a bit odd and a bit wrong, they're now in a position where, if you look at the breakfast show since Mike was benched, the ratings have halved. I think the bosses have made a catastrophic mistake commercially, but also in terms of standing up for the right to free speech. So on the basis that the Plank of the Week show that I was just referencing has now seen its audience halve from 300,000 a week to about 150,000 because of Mike Graham's absence. And his show, the breakfast show, which it looks like now might be taken over by Jeremy, I don't know, I don't think he knows yet, actually. The commercial implications of what's happened here, I'm afraid, I think now put a big question mark, not over just the commercial viability of Talk itself, but also its very future.
Well, they do, because remember, at the moment, viewers are switching off in their droves. Mike Graham is promising that he will be returning to air, including running the popular segments like Plank of the Week within weeks. And this is all the station has said. This is all they have said on air. Watch.
News UK, the parent company of the station Talk, has made the following statement. Their statement reads as follows: "We were made aware of an abhorrent and vile post on Mike Graham's social platform several weeks ago. Mike Graham said this was not posted by him, and he agreed to cooperate with a company investigation using an independent forensic firm. He later reneged on several opportunities to cooperate with the company investigation. We have been gravely concerned at his repeated failure to cooperate on such a serious matter, and the decision has been taken that Mike Graham will not return to Talk."
So that was it. And what they're doing now, what the management are doing now, is briefing against Mike Graham into the mainstream media. Now, this is exactly what GB News did to me, and actually continues to do to me to this day. And it's like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because the viewers understand why I did what I did, why Mike did what he did. And these sort of attacks, I think, do not go down well. But I'll read it to you. I'll tell you what they say because I want to show both sides of the story. This from the Daily Express. A TV insider, in other words, someone working for Rebecca Brooks and Talk TV, has revealed the real reason why Mike Graham was fired from Talk TV. And they go on to say that a source from News UK, the parent company of Talk, has given an insight into the real reason behind Graham's removal. They exclusively told the Daily Express Mike Graham had to go. He had to go. He claimed that his phone had been hacked, but everyone was skeptical of that explanation. He claimed that someone had hacked his Facebook account, but also hacked his iCloud and posted the offensive statement. News UK bosses gave him the benefit of the doubt and told him they would allow Mike and his legal representation to stand in a room with two forensic phone experts who would be able to go through his phone and figure out if he was actually hacked, who hacked the phone and what else they accessed. While Mike initially agreed to submitting his phone, he didn't turn up on the agreed date and time. So News UK gave him another date. And again, Mike did not turn up. This happened 4 times. 4 times he refused to hand over his phone. So News UK took the decision to end their working relationship with him. Mike was told he was sacked by the big boss. And they explained the reason behind the decision. To Connor Tomlinson now, host of the independent show Tomlinson Talks on YouTube. Connor, first up, I don't believe Mike Graham should have handed over his phone. I mean, that's an incredibly dangerous thing to do to a company like News UK. By the way, there has been loads of evidence and examples over the years of News UK actually handing over confidential journalistic sourcing to the police, Connor, to try and save their own necks. So Mike Graham, I know for a fact, had all of his private journalistic conversations on that device. It was a personal device, Connor. It was not a device owned by News UK. Do you see what I mean? It wasn't a work phone. So the fact that News UK think that they can say, and remember, News UK, biggest phone hackers, in history, can say, well, we're sacking him because he didn't hand over his phone. For me, I don't think that really is going to fly as an explanation. Certainly not amongst Talk viewers. What do you think?
I don't think it will fly amongst Mike's loyal listeners because they just want Mike back on the air no matter what. Mike was always rude and belligerent and quite dismissive. And so that's part of the charm that people that like listening to him enjoyed listening to. It was, however, something that caused him to lose allies. As I've discussed with you before, Dan, on your show, Mike decided to attempt to shit on people like me from a great height, and so has shrunk the number of people willing to come to his defense based on principle. And the reason is, as well, is because Mike's basically set this principle for himself. I mean, first of all, the insinuation here is, of course, that if News UK didn't feel that they had sufficient evidence without a forensic audit to prove that Mike had been hacked, what the suggestion seems to have been is Mike, drunk or sober, had made the ill-advised post and upset people with whom he shares a floor at TalkSport, caused discord in the building, and the News UK didn't think they could defend it. So Mike probably shouldn't have claimed that he was hacked if he wasn't willing to provide evidence of it, because there are big question marks about that. I mean, for example, I wanted an ex-girlfriend break into my Facebook account to monitor what I was saying for some time, and I could find out where, when, and using which IP address or phone she had used to get into the account. That's all available via Facebook. So Mike could have just provided that as a screenshot to News UK, presumably as a piece of evidence that he was hacked. If he didn't, then, well, we can only presume he wasn't hacked. But also, the other problem is that Mike, as I mentioned last time, in 2021, I believe it was, after the Euros, after Saka and Sterling missed their penalties, and England came second, lots of people, it seems from Russia and Saudi Arabia, put some abusive, racist messages online, and there was a big moral panic in the English press about rampant racism in Britain against black football players. And Mike, the following day, had said, well, we don't want racists in the country. If you're racist, you can leave or you can go to prison. Ta-ta! And it's like, well, Mike, unfortunately, when you post stuff like that, when you've already said that people deserve to be not just deplatformed, but, ostracized from civilization, well, you set up the standard for it to happen to you too.
Yeah, and of course, and I mean, people can go back and watch our previous conversation, Connor, but he's also made, I think, some really unfair comments about Tommy Robinson. But I'm also excited to see Mike outside of the mainstream too, because I have a feeling, especially once he's gone through something like this, I mean, certainly from my point of view, Connor, as soon as you are free from those shackles, and it was the shackles we were speaking about earlier in the show, right? Because for all intents and purposes, as independent as Mike and I tried to be on a whole load of different issues, certainly when you're at Talk, ultimately your boss is Rupert Murdoch and he does patrol the content. And for me at GB News, ultimately your boss is Paul Marshall and he does patrol the content. So I am excited to see this new era. And I think what's great, and certainly having had conversations with Mike about this in the past, like, he can be belligerent. That is his whole tone. And I understand why people like you and people like Tommy Robinson are like, you idiot, because you're now reaping what you sow. But I also think in the independent space, Mike will have those debates. Do you know what I mean? He's not someone who is going to be scared of going toe to toe. And I want to see that. I want to see you versus Mike Graham. I want to see Mike Graham versus Tommy Robinson. Personally, I do think he is an exciting person to bring into this independent space because, as you say, Connor, we need to build up this network, right? And of course, earlier in the show, you're talking much more about, young men. But Mike has a big audience, right? And he is one of the few people who I think will almost instantly bring that mainstream audience into the space. If you have been used to waking up with Mike Graham for a number of years, you're still going to want to wake up with Mike Graham. And actually, you're probably going to much prefer it if he's unshackled in the independent space.
Oh, I don't doubt he's going to have a massive audience and do very well for himself, Dan. He's probably going to enjoy it a lot more, not having to be beholden to Ofcom regulations or an editorial line. I mean, just look at the success that his and Kevin O'Sullivan's podcast, The Fault Police, has when they can just sit around in a pub, have a few drinks, swear a lot. They have people show up to live events. I think they did a live one at the Battle of Ideas. So it's very lucrative and there's clearly an audience for it. Stepping aside to whether or not I think Mike Graham will host these debates, because I don't think he will, because when I suggested we have a polite conversation about the same topic I'd spoken to Peter Cardwell about on the station before, so there wasn't a prohibitive editorial line at Talk about the influence of the World Economic Forum, he insulted me publicly and privately and then blocked me. However, even though I don't think he's going to have those debates, as you say, though he probably should, not necessarily with me, I think that this is a trend that is going to see a death by 1,000 cuts approach happen to traditional broadcast, print, and radio media. And that's because you are beholden to a biased government organisation that dictates what can and can't be said, increasingly shrinking its relevance within the Overton window when the British public wants to talk about issues like immigration, identity.
Yeah. Like, can Talk survive this, Connor? Because, Mark Dolan, come on. I mean, I know you probably think he's a lovely guy. Lots of people do. But, I mean, come on. Mark Dolan speaking for 4 hours about, some drama involving Adam Peaty and Gordon Ramsay's daughter. I mean, seriously?
Yeah, Mark stopped replying to my texts a very long time ago, so I don't.
You're definitely too honest for him.
Oh well, I mean, I'm grateful for him for having platformed me on this GB News show, but that platforming stopped despite promising to keep bringing me back, and then my texts were read and went unanswered, even though I just said, oh, congratulations on the new show, hope you do well online. So I don't think that they're going to be able to replicate the same audience sizes if they change out their main talking heads with loyal organic followings, and so if they keep caving to Ofcom pressure or political sensitivities, or even if just their hosts do silly things like this, because this is on mic, frankly, they're just going to lose talent, lose an audience over time. And also, it's just the production costs. I mean, do you remember when Talk expanded massively, dumped millions into Piers Morgan's show? Now, Piers Morgan's gone quote-unquote independent, and is making a lot of money and getting a lot of views.
Independent but broadcast on Channel 5, the ultimate woke TV station. So I think, can we please just put an end to the, this is not me criticising Piers Morgan, but I think, can we please just put an end to this baloney that Piers Morgan runs an independent show?
Yeah, but the point I'm making is that it doesn't have the same levels of production overhead as it was when it was at Talk. And so this old model of having a massive studio, of having presenters that get briefs from 5 or 6 producers that do all the research for them, that have to bring in guests, that get cars all the time, that's just gone by the wayside, because I can do all that with consistent viewing figures higher than some of these outlets do every day, and I do all my own research, I do all my own editing, and I just film it from my office with a webcam and a microphone. The overheads are very low, and if people can make a living and a large audience for themselves doing just that, with far fewer production staff, not under the auspices of an editorial line by a corporation or a government, then people are going to gravitate towards that, and it seems that Mike's going to do pretty well for himself by doing that.
Okay, so I am now just laughing about this total disaster for the British Bashing Corporation. But what is quite, how do I put it? Quite pleasing for me in a way. You saw my reaction live on air on yesterday's show, is the fact that Newsnight has now been dragged into this mess because Newsnight has tried to reinvent itself under Victoria Derbyshire as some type of, unbiased debate show. But trust me, it is as crooked a broadcast to the left of the BBC that there is. And their exposure as part of this Donald Trump takedown is utterly beautiful to watch. Utterly, utterly beautiful to watch. So I've got a very personal reason for feeling this way as well in regards to Newsnight, which someone actually reminded me of yesterday, and I will come to that in 1 second. But first, let me bring you the latest developments on this story as the deadline ticks ever closer. So on the front page of The Guardian today, the fact that the BBC, has apologised, but rejecting the fact that they're going to pay any money to Donald Trump, even though my Trump sources revealed that actually he only wants $15 million. $15 million will mean that the $1 billion lawsuit goes away. But the BBC say no and announce the decision on air in this way.
To start with this breaking news, of course, the BBC has apologised to President Trump for a Panorama episode on the events of January the 6th, which spliced parts of his speech together. The corporation says it will not show the programme again, but has rejected his demands for compensation. OK, let's bring you the BBC's statement. Lawyers for the BBC have written to President Trump's legal team in response to a letter received on Sunday. And the quote is, BBC Chair Samir Shah has separately sent a personal letter to the White House, making clear to President Trump that he and the corporation are sorry for the edit of the president's speech of the 6th of January 2021, which featured on the programme. The BBC has no plans to rebroadcast the documentary Trump: A Second Chance on any BBC platforms. And while the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, we strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim.
But oopsie daisy, it wasn't a one-off. As we all knew, this was a systematic BBC campaign against Donald Trump, which, of course, BBC News have had to admit. Watch.
The BBC has been accused of misleading or of a misleading edit of Donald Trump's 6th of January speech 2 years before the Panorama sequence that saw the resignation of the Director General. The clip of his speech, first run on Newsnight in 2022, is reported by the Telegraph newspaper.
And here is that Daily Telegraph report. They're bang to rights.
Walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol. And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol. And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
And the footage then cuts immediately to scenes of people fighting.
Okay, so they're completely bang to rights. But what Newsnight did last night, and this is something that Connor Tomlinson is going to be so annoyed about, but not surprised about, what the BBC did was bring on a conservative, someone on the right, to defend them. But of course, it actually wasn't a conservative or someone on the right at all. It was Ian Dale from LBC. Watch.
Newsnight played a clip out of sequence of the US president 2 years before Panorama. What do you make of it, Ian?
Well, it's another headache that the BBC doesn't really need to have. I don't think it is quite as serious as the other one, because I think there was the section was included, and we're going to sort of go to pay tribute to the senators and Congress people, and then it went on to the fight bit, and you can argue about whether that was an appropriate way to edit it.
So look, ultimate containment dude. Right, not a conservative at all. And of course, he's there so that the BBC look as if they're providing balance, but indeed he's trying to dampen everything down. And it was actually Chris Rose who reminded me, indeed I hadn't seen it in the first place because I just sort of switched the media off at that point. Yeah, there's my mugshot as if I'm a terrorist or something. And Chris Rose posted, remember BBC Newsnight were happy to invite, in quotation marks, Tory MP Caroline Noakes and Adam Bolton to discuss GB News. Caroline said it should be taken off air. Adam said, frankly, what Ofcom should do is shut it down. BBC Newsnight were happy to air doctored clips of Trump's speech. And he posted a clip. Chris Rose posted a clip. As I say, I hadn't watched it at the time because you can imagine the state that I was in when the whole, world came collapsing down on me because I'd smirked on air. And this clip on Newsnight is actually extraordinary. Caroline Noakes, again, who's meant to be the conservative, in this clip acts as if I had conducted some type of terrorism for smirking on air at a Laurence Fox sexist joke. Watch.
Conservative Party right here. Conservative MP, what do you make of that?
Well, we do indeed have a fracas right here, which actually, if the fracas hadn't happened, very few people would have seen this on GB News. And although David's making the point that this is some sort of row over the future of the Conservative Party, it's to a tiny, tiny audience. What I want to see is Ofcom given the space to do its job, to investigate it thoroughly. Ofcom has a really proud record of defending free speech, but I don't want a regulator that's going to shoot from the hip. So it's easy for me to sit here and say, and actually agree with Adam, I think it should be taken off air. It was entirely predictable that Laurence Fox was going to come out with a statement that was that offensive. I think what was less predictable would be Dan Wootton's smirking reaction. But really, I think Ofcom deserves a bit of time and space to do its job. And if we as Parliament aren't happy with the regulations that are set, then maybe we should be tightening them up.
What do you think you should?
Well, look, I'm not sitting here as the chair of the DCMS Select Committee, but as the
I
Women
did
Equalities
Yep.
Committee. I think it's something that we have to look at. But you run that real risk, don't you? That they're going to disappear off to weird online platforms where they will develop big followings of equally strange people.
Here we are! Here we are, Connor, the strange people on the weird online platform being watched by far more people that ever watched Newsnight. It happened, Caroline Noakes. You were warned. You took the wrong approach. But I mean, the reason I brought that up, Connor, is because it's extraordinary that there they were, because I smirked at the fact that Laurence Fox didn't want to shag someone. There they were, dedicating the entire episode of Newsnight, saying that the entire GB News channel should be forcibly taken off air, right? Then you compare it to the fact that Newsnight has just been exposed for fraudulently claiming that Donald Trump encouraged violence on January the 6th. We don't need to go into why that clip, we've done it to death, why that clip was so bad on so many levels. But they're not suggesting that the British Bashing Corporation should be shut down or that Panorama should be taken off air, are they? They bring Ian Dale on, the so-called guy on the right, to say, oh, actually, this isn't really that bad. And doesn't it just sum up everything wrong with the mainstream media?
Yeah, God forbid Laurence Fox say after the watershed that he doesn't want to have sex with a left-wing woman and therefore cause the people sitting on the sofa in the studios that have been occupied by the likes of Jimmy Savile and Hugh Edwards to lose their collective rag over it. Heaven forbid. Also, take the entire station off air because Laurence made an offensive joke or statement. Again, the BBC, this isn't just their only time of deceptive editing. I note, by the way, Dan, that they didn't emphasise the part of Trump's speech where he said we want to peacefully and patriotically make our voices heard. Instead, they just emphasised that fight like hell bit, which, of course...
53 minutes later, he said it.
Exactly. Pretty much every left-wing politician uses that analogy as well. No, what Panorama did, what Newsnight are doing, what the BBC have done collectively, is continue the Radio Rwanda-style rhetoric that has accused Trump of being a fascist, a dictator, a Nazi, the reincarnation of Adolf Hitler, and therefore led to not just his multiple assassination attempts, the near miss, which then led to the death of father and firefighter Corey Imperatore, but also then the death of Charlie Kirk. And so they have contributed to a media environment which lies, smears, misrepresents their political opponents and puts them quite literally in the crosshairs of political assassins, and then invites their other political opponents that posture as being the reasonable response on the same side, the right, like Ian Dale, onto the sofa to denigrate them and defend the BBC instead. But again, BBC isn't the only instance of them lying. I've had multiple encounters now with the sozzle discredited journalist John Sweeney, who decided to show up to an Oxford Union debate a couple of weeks ago against me, drunk as a skunk and wearing a beanie like an overage South Park character. And if we all remember correctly, he disgraced Panorama when Tommy Robinson caught him with an undercover camera trying to stitch up Robinson by embellishing sexual assault accusations, and when Robinson played the footage back to Sweeney, when Sweeney looked like a dog chewing a wasp, he remained unrepentant for his attempt to smear and label the man and try to cancel him for one of the most sort of heinous crimes that a man could commit against a woman. And so the BBC is, as Carl Benjamin once said, one of the many dirty, dirty smear merchants in this country who knowingly lie about their political opponents and endanger their lives. And so even though I don't think President Trump needs any more money, so to speak, though he has lost a lot doing what he has for his country, I am happy for him to take the pennies out of the mouths of the people at the BBC so that they can't continue being the number one buyer of The Guardian in our country and keeping that particular rag afloat.
Naga Munchetty, the host of BBC Breakfast, is now officially being probed for bullying after a string of allegations. Now, this is connected to the defenestration of the BBC's head of news, Deborah Turness, this week. It feels like Turness had been there protecting this woman. I've said for some time, I think there's a lot of snowflakes working at the British Bashing Corporation, but there is a huge disparity and hypocrisy in terms of how Naga Munchetty has been treated as a woman of colour compared to how Kay Adams has been treated as a white woman, taken off air. Or how Greg Wallace and John Turode have been treated as white men, had their careers destroyed by the BBC. Because the accusations against Naga Munchetty are far worse than those against those others. I'm not saying she's guilty, but I'm just saying, why is there one rule when it comes to others who are immediately taken off air, have their reputation destroyed, and another rule for Ms. Naga Munchetty? So let me take you through this new reporting, which has actually broken overnight in The Sun, which reveals her future is now hanging by a thread as a formal probe has been launched into her bullying behaviour. And let me just go into the details here. The Breakfast presenter's conduct had been under review, but bosses escalated it to a full investigation this week. Remember, that's the same time that Tim Davie and Deborah Turness announced their departures from the BBC over the Donald Trump scandal. The Sun goes on. We first revealed in June that the BBC One morning show was facing a bullying inquiry amid claims of a toxic workplace. However, a string of further allegations against Munchetty, who also works for Radio 5 Live, had come to light, and insulter told The Sun. There is speculation that she may be particularly vulnerable after the departure of the head of news, Deborah Turness, who quit on Sunday over the edit of a Donald Trump speech. Munchetty is among BBC talent who was said to have been protected by Turness. We can also reveal that the telly presenter has parted ways with her long-standing showbiz agent. Her detractors are gossiping that the timing with Deborah's departure isn't exactly a coincidence. A source said the Naga situation has been an albatross around Breakfast's neck since June, when the endemic bullying at Media City was first exposed by The Sun. Whilst others have been cleared, the review on Naga has done the opposite, with further complaints against her. They had no choice but to take things from the slightly softer under review to formal investigation. Of course, her detractors are gossiping that the timing with Deborah's departure isn't exactly a coincidence. Breakfast boss Richard Frediani initially faced bully claims before Munchetty and her co-host Charlie State were also accused. Complaints against Frediani were eventually not upheld, which some saw as the cue for Munchetty's exit. Accusations against her range from laying into an intern for incorrectly spreading Marmite on her toast through to making an unwelcome sexual remark to a female colleague. Meanwhile, State remains under review. Some complaints were raised under the BBC's Call It Out scheme set up in the aftermath of the scandal over former MasterChef presenters Greg Wallace and John Turode. Munchetty also no longer has heavyweight showbiz agency M&C Saatchi in her corner. The firm confirmed to The Sun it no longer represented her. And of course, viewers have been aware of some behaviour which has been described as bullying for a long time based on Naga Munchetty's quite bizarre on-air antics. Watch this.
Because you've come in making sure you've done your research on us as well.
Well, I think it's polite.
Also
It is
pointing your
polite.
finger quite
And-
a lot, to be honest.
What do you?
That really, I'm so sorry, Charlie.
Do you not like being interviewed?
Do you know, I like communication. I don't mind.
You wish you were here now.
I don't like ice cream, Hannah.
You don't like ice cream,
No.
but you just said pistachio.
If I had to eat an ice cream for the rest of my life, it would be pistachio flavour, but I don't like cold food.
Do you like brownies?
Not so much. But, you know, we'll get to know each other, Hannah. And you'll find out Charlie likes ice cream. You'll get more
You definitely
Charlie.
will. I won't be bringing brownies into the office then.
No, everyone else does. Don't let me deny the rest of the office. Hannah, it's been great talking to you. I'm glad you're enjoying the ice cream. Certainly needed in this weather. Take care.
I'm having a great time, yeah.
Thanks. Hannah being sent. Imagine that. Oh, business correspondent. What's your job? I've got to be sent to an ice cream factory, and you actually like an ice cream parlour.
Do you think you rather brought the tone down then?
Oh,
by
be
saying-
quiet. Come on.
Well, but Hannah
I
was-
apologise.
She was working hard, doing the story, and then... time now for a look at the headlines where you are this morning.
You would hear the voice later, and can you look interested? I'll look this way. Which camera? So the interesting thing here is that one thing is, which is it, camera 3? What am I? What, a 4? No, I wanted a single because I think we just need to remove. There we are. The interesting thing you'll be asking at home is, what is the effect of that on a conversation you might have on Mars? So the effect of that is, one, you wouldn't hear the voice. You wouldn't hear the voice as quickly. It would take a while to travel, and also it would be quite a bit quieter. So now you know, if you're having a conversation on Mars shortly, we know the official details on that.
I'm sweating.
It's nice when people pay attention, isn't it, what you're saying? It really is. Have you got a story?
Connor Tomlinson, host of Tomlinson Talks, on YouTube with me now. Connor, this is a really interesting one, okay, because I want to express a nuanced position. I am not saying that Naga Munchetty is a terrible bully and a sexual harasser who should lose her job. I am not saying that. I have not seen evidence of that. But what I am saying is that there are multiple claims against her, and she seems to have survived in her job, where Kay Adams was immediately pulled from air, where Greg Wallace and John Turode were sacked. And let me just be blunt about it, because she is a woman of colour. That is the only differentiating factor here. And I think there needs to be one rule. Do you know what I mean? If you face these allegations at the BBC, either you're pulled off air while an investigation takes place. That's exactly what has happened to Kay Adams, or you're not. Why are there different rules for Naga Munchetty?
Well, thanks for forcing me to sit through those clips, Dan. I don't pay the license fee for a reason. I have toenails to pull out rather than watch BBC Breakfast. Blimey, they were awkward, weren't they? But yeah, no, I agree. I think BBC's institutional culture of enforcing, 50% of the news coverage to be hosted by women, to beyond their share of the population, artificially inflate the careers of non-Indigenous, non-white presenters and broadcasters and even actors. I mean, see the disaster that unfolded with Ncuti Gatwa and Doctor Who. I think this creates an institutional culture where accountability can be evaded by people if they have the intersectionally approved characteristics. If they are a woman, if they are not a white woman, and if they are not a straight woman, if the allegations of sexual harassment are to be upheld. And so what's happened here is that even though the very allegation was enough to lead to the cancellation of someone like Greg Wallace, who is an English barrow boy, who may have acted imprudently on set, but it wasn't worth multiple weeks of national news coverage for it. Whereas he got that treatment, the allegation itself has not been enough to defenestrate this news anchor. And it also is ironic to me, though, that this is happening because when the institutions, public institutions like media and corporations and government do this sort of thing, it's because they have been captured by what Helen Andrews in Compact magazine said is the great feminization, the sort of HRification of every institution, the treatment of every institution and its culture like a teenage girl's lunch table, where if you do something that's a bit icky, or one member of the group finds that they could accrue social capital by ostracizing you and disapproving you and turning the entire group against you, then they can and they will. And it's hilarious that someone here, the beneficiary of, diversity, equity, and inclusion laws, the beneficiary of the culture of promoting female talent, of wanting a kinder, softer, gentler approach to reading the news, more feminine, less masculine, has now found herself on the outs as part of this great feminine institutional culture that does bullying with a smile.
Very well put, Connor Tomlinson. And of course, for so much more of Connor, then I really recommend you subscribe to his brilliant YouTube channel, Tomlinson Talks. He is also obviously on Substack and X as well. Connor, thank you so much. Have an amazing weekend. But before we go today, we are going to reveal today's worst Briton in the world this week. And it is when we put our union jackasses from Monday to Thursday head to head. A reminder of your winners from earlier in the week. Adil Ray on Monday. Do you remember he pushed Sharia law? And even though he was hauled in by ITV bosses, it's like clearly okay with Sharia law, which means, the stoning of death to adulterer females and gay men like me being pushed off the top of buildings. Tuesday, Tim Davie, the outgoing BBC Director General, really because of his total incoherence in regards to just how serious what is going on with the BBC really is. Wednesday, our favourite, the tit whisperer, Zach Polanski, the Islamist leader of the Green Party. And Thursday, Tony Blair, the ex-Prime Minister who continues to push for the introduction of compulsory digital ID. Let me get to your feedback first, though, before I announce the results. So many votes so far. We've had over 50,000 already. Maiden writes, I voted Tim Davie. He has made a fortune working with the BBC and is now going to get a whopping payout. I'm just glad I don't pay in to his fat paycheck. Ranged Lime says, all these people would not be as prominent as they were if it wasn't for the way Tony Blair undermined and obliterated our country. He is the worst Brit every day of the week. Visur Kava says, Blair is the architect of all who came after him, all those progressive liberal autocrats who are neither left or right but an offshoot of the extremes of both, wearing a smile and smug contempt for all they see below him. Christine 302 said, Tony Blair started the rot in the Labour Party. He taught them how to lie, how to spin the facts, and how to get away with corruption, resign, and come back again. Burnley Tindley said, all four are terrible, but I'm going for Adil Ray for trying to grill a 100-year-old war veteran who in my eyes is more of a man than you will ever be, Mr. Ray. Timo UK said Adil Ray for promoting and advocating for Sharia law in the West and race-baiting a World War II veteran on live TV. And yeah, that was another reason people were so disgusted by Adil Ray this week. The way he dealt with that war veteran on GMB was just horrendous. Okay, to your results. There's a tie for third place between Tim Davie and Zach Polanski with 12% of the vote. The runner-up with 33% of the vote, former Prime Minister, but is he still pulling the strings, Tony Blair. But the worst Briton in the world this week for advocating Sharia law with 44% of your vote, woke ITV's Good Morning Britain presenter, Adil Ray. Okay, we're moving over to Substack now for the last uncancelled after show of the week. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle told a flat-out lie about the Kardashians having a photo consent form for Kris Jenner's 70th birthday party, meaning it's now war between Hollywood royalty and our fake royals. So I'm really looking forward to this. We are teaming up with the royal YouTube sensation, according to Taz, for the latest. I would love you to join us over on Substack. It is a free speech platform. You can subscribe completely for free, by the way. The address, www.outspoken.live. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We are back with you live 5 p.m. UK time, Monday, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe right now on YouTube. I'd also love you to subscribe to our podcast as well, which is available on all podcast platforms. You can actually watch on video now on Spotify, but you can also listen on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. All I ask, because it really helps us in the algorithm, and we are a completely independent outfit, no big companies or big investors or anything. So all I ask is that you rate and review, because it helps boost us in the algorithm. Thank you so much for your company all week. And as ever, most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you.